You were there when it happened. On the walls of the city, a day like any other. The Nordloid came from nothing, teleported into the sky above Baldur's Gate. 1 minute there were clear skies, the next, chaos. You watched as the walls crumbled around you, swatted as if they were nothing by giant tentacles. You watched your men fall, men who you had known their entire lives, and then nothing. You remember screaming with hoarse lungs as the capsule you were in refused to budge. You remember snarling and swearing vengeance as they put that damn tadpole behind your eye. Finally, you remember praying to Bahamut that you would get a chance to right this injustice. A captain of the guard, 2 decades devoted to mentoring and leading, a most renowned archer of your generation, all of it reduced to nothing in a single moment, stripped of power, rendered utterly impotent. Hey guys, welcome. My name's Seb, and just a quick disclaimer before we start. So this is a concept first, optimized second style build, building around a concept rather than the best possible damage. This build looks like it should be a heap of fun to play though, and I hope you enjoy it. If you wanted to hang around till I think break time for this specific build, I will quickly run through some changes that I might make to make the build a bit more optimized. If that's what you're after, check the timestamps. Now let's get into the build, level by level. Character creation. So, character today is a commander of soldiers, a captain of the guard, and I really want them to excel in combat, but even more so, I want them to be a fantastic strategist and leader on the battlefield. They are the face of the party, negotiating or intimidating, along with buffing your party and causing havoc for the enemies. So the playstyle for this one is a little weird. Don't expect to be getting a bunch of attacks per round, and think of this more as a support character who can dish out some decent damage when they need to. So for this character, we're going high half-elf. As always, the race doesn't matter too much here, although I really like the idea that our character has a tiny spark of magical talent due to their heritage, but nothing potent. In fact, I would say I'm going out of my way to re-flavor spells that we take as more charismatic or martial training type abilities. The first example of this is with our chosen cantrip. We are taking the Friends cantrip, giving us advantage on charisma checks against non-hostile targets. What a great way to start the build out with a little bit of friendship. Next, our class. And for our commander, we are going, of course, fighter. This will give us proficiency in strength and constitution saving throws, and this will come up a bit later when it comes to concentration. Great proficiency to have. As a fighter though, we also get second wind, allowing us to heal for 1d10 plus our fighter levels for a bonus action once per short rest. And finally, we get our fighting style, and we are going archery, giving us a +2 to our attack rolls with ranged weapon attacks. Now onto the background, and of course we are going soldier for this build, giving us proficiency in athletics and intimidation. And finally, ability scores and proficiencies. So we'll be focusing on dex for this build, as we are personally a ranged attacker. Therefore, we are going 10 in strength, 15 in dex, +2 for 17 there, 14 in constitution, 8 in intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 14 charisma, +1 for 15 there. For proficiencies, we have athletics and intimidation from our soldier background, and we are going to choose insight and persuasion here. Finally, I am playing this as an older character, one who has seen and commanded battles. So if you're following along, don't forget to maybe add a scar or two and increase that maturity slider. Other than that, grit your teeth, find yourself a heavy crossbow, and shoot your way off the ship and on to level 2. Now, level 2, another big one. As the introduction suggests, we are feeling absolutely powerless after everything that has happened to us. The usually pragmatic and in control leader is falling apart, and in so doing turning to the gods. As level 2 sees us taking a single level in Cleric. Now, Cleric lets us choose quite a few things for our first level. Firstly, we choose a deity, and I'll leave this up to you. There are a few good ones out there for a just and compassionate leader, or for an imposing dictator. Personally, I'm taking Bahamut. Next, we get to choose some cantrips, and as I mentioned earlier, we are taking features that could be reflavored, such as Guidance, Thaumaturgy, and Resistance. I love the idea of Guidance being a whisper to an ally about something that you noticed, or Resistance being a shout of warning to an ally to dodge. Next, we get to choose our domain, and we are taking the Life domain. As we are only dipping one level in Cleric, I want to get the most out of the domain as I can, and getting Bless as a domain spell, along with the Disciple of Life feature to buff our healing by a few points, will be incredibly potent. There are other more thematic features in other domains, like the Light domain, for example, but the ability to use your Warding Flare on allies doesn't come online until level 7, and I didn't want to invest that much into Cleric. For these early levels, I would definitely be using your concentration on Bless, and if you have another Cleric in your party maybe, shift their focus to a different area, like damage dealing. Finally, we get to prepare a spell, and there are a few good ones here, but I really like Command for this spell. I think it's very thematic and fun to force your enemies to grovel or to drop their weapons and flee. For level 3, I think you have sort of started to find your footing again a bit. You feel your god's strength flowing through you, and with the new strength to push onwards, you feel your old ways beginning to return. The other party members are as lost as you are and looking for someone to lead them through this chaos. You are that person, and as you realize that, you begin to take fighter levels again to help you regain confidence in your abilities. So we are now a level 2 fighter, and we gain Action Surge, letting us to take 2 actions on our turn, once per short rest. Use it as you please for now, it will get fantastic later. So level 4, and we are gaining our fighter subclass. And as the incredible commander and tactician that you are, we are taking Battlemaster. Battlemaster is perfect for this build, as its key feature is battlefield maneuvers and superiority dice. So you get 4 of these superiority die, which you get back on a short rest, and you spend them to use these battlefield maneuvers. They are currently a D8. This is important, as they often, not always, but often, allow you to add that D8 to whatever maneuver you are using. Now, what are the maneuvers that we are taking? Well, we get 3 of them, and there are some fantastic options here, so take your time to read through them, but for us, we are taking Commander's Strike, which for our action, bonus action, and a superiority die, allow us to command an ally to attack an enemy on their turn, using their reaction, effectively giving them an extra attack. Fantastic for your heavy-hitting, two-handed melee frontliner, or maybe another archer with sharpshooter. Next, we are taking Maneuvering Attack, adding a D8 to our next attack, and if we hit, we can select a friendly creature and give them half their movement speed back, and they can move without provoking opportunity attacks. Fantastic if the enemy has run away from a melee ally on their turn, or if you need to get an ally out of a really bad situation. Finally, we are taking Rally. This is more of a thematic option, but for our bonus action, we get to grant an ally a guaranteed 8 temporary hit points for 5 turns. Commanding and bolstering your allies. This is where you belong. Your skill in this is exceptional, and as you work with your team, they begin to discuss tactics with you before you turn in each night. You begin to understand their strengths and weaknesses and develop new tactics. And on level 5, we take another level in Fighter and pick up the Martial Adept feat. This allows us to unlock 1 more superiority die, bringing our total to 5 per short rest and unlocking 2 more maneuvers. You discussed with your allies how a well-placed shot can remove an enemy from the fight completely, knocking them off a ledge or out a window. And so this time we are taking Pushing Attack, which grants us an additional D8 on an attack and pushes an enemy back 4.5 meters. You also discussed the advantages of fighting an enemy who has been knocked off their feet, and so for the second maneuver, we are taking Trip Attack, once again granting us an additional D8 and knocking our enemy prone. And on level 6, you have built up enough trust with your allies that they trust your tactics completely now, allowing us to give multiple attacks on a turn as we take a 5th level in Fighter, giving us old trusty extra attack, allowing us to take a second attack whenever we take the attack action. Now, let's take a half time here and firstly discuss extra attack. So this feature is surprisingly potent for our commander. Most of the commands we give are on the attack action, therefore allowing us to do 2 in a single turn. Maneuvering, pushing, and trip attack have a lot of uses and are really only limited by your superiority die, which come back on a short rest, so are pretty dependable. Commander Strike is a bit more resource intensive, using your bonus action as well. However, it does still count as an attack, so you can use it and still use another attack on your turn. Speaking of Commander Strike, it might take some getting used to, as you might assume that you use it and your ally can then attack straight away. However, they actually just get a buff, granting them another attack on their turn. This can be a little frustrating, however, as it uses their reaction on their turn. Their reaction is still free this turn though, so with some careful planning, you can get your ally in close to an enemy, and you may still get an opportunity attack in and still get to make use of the buff next turn. Either way, it's an extra attack which could be the difference in a tough enemy dying. So, just in from the editing room, and I've done a bit more testing with Commander Strike, and I think the best case scenario usage for this ability is actually when you and your allies are at the same point in the turn order, meaning that you can take your turns at the same time. In this scenario, you can either attack with your heavy two-handed frontliner or whoever you intend to buff with this buff, and then take your commander's turn, giving them another extra attack. Just make sure that you don't end all of your turns before going back to your heavy hitter, or choose to take your commander's turn first. This way you can utilize any of the buffs that you give from this attack or maneuvering strike on the same turn that you cast it. Next, let's look at status effects and what options you have during a fight. I would try to be the one concentrating on Bless for my allies to free up concentration for my Cleric, if I have one, or any other spellcaster. This is easy for us since we have a decent Constitution and Constitution saving throw proficiency. Next, I would be making use of Rally on my frontliner, buffing them up with some extra hit points. In terms of status effects though, Prone, which is caused by Trip Attack, causes all melee attacks against the target to be made with advantage. It also causes disadvantage for strength and dex saves if you wanted to follow up with a pushing attack or set an ally up for a shove off a cliff or an AoE spell. This is the way to do it. Next, there are a few effects that you shouldn't ignore. Firstly, Disciple of Life from the Life Cleric subclass makes your Cure Wounds spell, Combat Triage ability, extra potent, with a guaranteed 4 healing, going up to a max of 11, which is pretty decent in early levels. I would also recommend you make use of the Command spell in early levels. Unfortunately, the DC won't be getting any higher unless you swap your stats around a bit. I'll leave this to your discretion, but I would use it early before it falls off, or there is too much demand on your action, as we won't be increasing our wisdom at all. Just on that point, if you did want to bump wisdom a bit and change your cleric subclass to focus more on the cleric side of things in your playthrough, the other subclasses I considered were knowledge, war, and light. All have strong abilities. War gives you a number of bonus action attacks, but it's based on your wisdom proficiency bonus per long rest. Next, the light domain lets you use your action to impose disadvantage on an attacker, As far as I know, there is no limit to the number of times per day, it just costs your reaction. Finally, knowledge gives you proficiency in either nature, arcana, history, or religion, and then doubles the proficiency in those skills. All good options, but life brings the most commander or party support type utility. So there is a solid debate between longbow and heavy crossbow as well for this character. I think as a sharpshooter and half-elf, a longbow is probably more thematic. I think as a commander and a soldier who is going for raw power, a crossbow probably fits more. I'm going with a crossbow, but you pick what you prefer. It should still work without any issues. So just with the crossbow skills though, definitely make use of brace if you are going to be making a few attacks in your turn to bump up the damage. As for piercing shot, take it or leave it. The damage is kind of minimal. I hope no one is too disappointed that there hasn't been any ranger levels like I put in the hype video. I opted to remove ranger from the build as it was just a little bit too self-serving as a class, and I really wanted to focus more on the party, less so on making a character that was a fantastic archer. Finally, for halftime, let's just take a look at some gear for the early game. Pick up an early heavy crossbow, of course. It shouldn't be too difficult to find or buy a +1 crossbow. I believe there is one in the Druid's Grove, but I'll let you track it down. Armor-wise, there isn't a lot of standout pieces. Bit of a spoiler here, but Boots of Brilliance might be handy, or Amulet of Misty Step, Boots of Striding, Fleet Fingers, or even Warped Band of Intellect to help you with your intelligence-based skill checks you might be struggling with. Other than that, find a nice set of heavy armor and back to the build. So with our confidence restored, we have begun to really prep our team for combat, giving pre-battle speeches, tactics meetings, or sometimes in combat you are even talking down your enemies, as we are taking spoiler-free bard levels now. I try to think of this less as a musical bard and more as being talented with your words and inspiring others to action or even greater heights. As at level 7 you are taking Bard 1, and we get quite a few things here. This is where your high elf nature might present itself a little because you maybe can't reflavor all of these spells. Firstly, we get the well-known Bardic Inspiration, which we will get 3 charges per long rest, allowing us to add an additional d6 to an ally's next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. This is a fantastic and versatile feature. By default, it is set to trigger automatically, however. You can set this in your reactions window to ask if you would like to use it. This will be important again shortly, but I would recommend setting this to ask. Also, the Bardic Roll ability, used for ability checks, will also be toggled on by default. I'll leave that up to you if you want that to trigger automatically. Next we get 2 cantrips, and I really love Vicious Mockery here. Now this does do a little damage, 2d4 psychic, and more importantly it gives a creature disadvantage on its next attack roll. This doesn't specify either, so it can be a spell attack roll, which might be important. This is perfect. I love the flavor of talking down your enemies, convincing them that their defeat is inevitable. Second, we get a few options here. True Strike might be okay, giving you advantage. Same with Blade Ward. However, I would like to get something that's a little more useful to our allies. I think this will be Mage Hand for us, giving us a little utility. We also get 4 level 1 spells. There are a few I like here. Let's go over them quickly, and going forward, feel free to pause the video and read over tooltips for anything that I don't fully explain. So firstly, Heroism could be really great, giving a target 5 temporary hit points per turn and immunity to Frightened. Longstrider is great, can be ritual cast out of combat and lasts until a long rest, so each party member can have an additional 3 meters of extra movement. Forced March. Healing Word is a great ranged heal as well for down allies, even better with Disciple of Life. Dissonant Whispers maybe, decent damage, and the Frightened condition might be a bit hard to reflavor though. Charm Person is great, giving advantage on charisma checks, but you're just going to have to pick what you like. These are the ones that I'm taking, and then finally we get an instrument. And like I said, I don't really vibe with the music part of bards for this character, so we are taking the drums of war with us into battle. Finally, for level 1 bard, we get a proficiency, and we are taking investigation. Big level. And on it goes. With level 8, we will be a bard 2. This gives us 2 level 2 spell slots, so we don't have any level 2 spells just yet, but I will point out that the majority of your current spells will affect more targets if you upcast them with one of those level 2 spell slots. Definitely consider upcasting Bless to include a 4th party member. We also gain the Jack of all trades feature on this level, granting us half our proficiency bonus rounded down to ability checks that you are not proficient in. Happy days. Finally, we get Song of Rest. Now, this is an exceptional ability for us, as it acts as a 3rd short rest before taking a long rest. Since our weapon skills, superiority die, and even action surge refresh on a short rest, we can be refueling ourselves very frequently. So level 9, and we have reached our Bard subclass. I think at this point in your journey, you are starting to be inspired yourself by the courageous, selfless, or even daring acts of your companions. Thinking of the tales that they will one day tell, or that will one day be told about them. As you feel that, given your age, this might be your final saga, and you want to keep the memory of these heroes alive. And what better way to do that than the College of Valor? So as a College of Valor Bard, we get an upgraded Bardic Inspiration, known as Combat Inspiration, allowing us to now add a d6 to the previous options, but also to our weapon damage or to our AC, giving us a much more interesting option for our allies in combat, defensively and offensively. Next, we gain expertise in 2 skills. I say take your pick here. I like dialogue options, so probably insight and intimidation for me. Perception is also a great option. We also get level 2 spells on this level, and there are a few great options, however, not necessarily thematic, or they take up your concentration, like Heat Metal. It's a great spell, and the reactivation is on your bonus action too, so it might be a good option. Or the one I will probably be taking is Blindness, allowing us to give our allies advantage on another enemy. So level 10, and we are taking a final level in Bard. We unlock level 3 spell slots here and get another cantrip and spell. Pick something you like. We generally have everything thematic already, but if you see something that I missed that has awesome flavor, let me know in the comments. Finally, we also get a feat on this level, and we have 2 options as I see it. We can either show these rookies how it's done and take the Sharpshooter feat, reducing our chance to hit by 5, but increasing our damage by 10. Or we can increase our Dex and Charisma here, giving us an 18 in Dex, increasing our damage and saves slightly, and a 16 in Charisma, raising our social proficiency and spell DC slightly. So now, whichever you didn't take, you will be taking next level anyway, as on level 11 we are going back to Fighter, and we don't get anything else here. We only get another feat. So pick the one you didn't just take, and on to level 12. So as for our final level, level 12, I will present you with 2 options. Firstly, we take a final level in Fighter, bringing us to Fighter 7. This gives us 1 more superiority die, bringing our total to 6, and 2 more maneuvers, probably evasive footwork and precision attack. Or we can take a final level in Bard, giving us 1 more Bardic Inspiration charge, bringing the total to 4. We get improved Bardic Inspiration, increasing the die from a D6 to a D8. We get Font of Inspiration, causing our Bardic Inspiration charges to now come back on a short rest. And finally, we unlock a single level 3 spell. I would take either Glyph of Warding here, giving us a fantastic elemental damage rune drawn on the ground in ancient High Elven language, or Fear, terrifying all the cultists of the Absolute in their boots. And that's a wrap. This build has so many different ways to play it. You could be joining in the combat or commanding from afar. It could even be in the melee, casting few spells but directly influencing enemies. Hopefully with your high dex score, you will really get to make use of the high initiative and get in plenty of commander strikes before your allies have a turn. Now, I prefer to leave the later part of the character narrative open so you can make your own choices as you go through the campaign. But thanks so much for sticking around till the end, and let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the guide, or let me know what you did differently in your playthrough. If you did enjoy the content, here's another fun build for you to check out and maybe play. And until next time, see ya!